The Navy really took a hell of a beating. There's no two ways about it. Oh, they just dive bombed the heck out of the battleships parked around Ford Island.
You are about to embark upon the Great Crusade
to meet this mounting aggression.
And make no mistake about it, good will prevail.
Hitler was in the news. It was pretty obvious that we were going to be in a war, that you couldn't get around that. And at the time, I would say there was a hell of a depression going on at that time. And people wondered where they were going to get the next dollar. It was that bad. And I thought it was time for me to hit the road. After walking around a few days with a dime in my pocket, I walked into the recruiting office and I said to the sergeant, "I'll sign up if you can get me near airplanes." He got on the phone, spent about an hour or more, and then he said to me, "There's no place in the stateside. You'll have to go to Hawaii." I said, "I'll take it." And I did my darndest to get into aircraft maintenance training to become an aircraft mechanic. And that took a few months to get lined up to go to the aircraft maintenance course in Hawaii. Finally, I did somewhere in 41. In 41. I'm now an aircraft mechanic. And of course, December 7, 41, as you well know, that changed things quite a bit. That morning, we were on our way and approaching Wheeler Field, which is just a wee bit north of Pearl Harbor itself, and Hickam Field. I noticed 3 zeros overhead. I didn't know they were Japanese. I saw the red ball and I said to my buddies, I said, "Wonder who those airplanes belong to. I've never seen them before." And I said jokingly, at least I thought so, I said, "You know, we might be at war." And about 4 or 5 minutes later, we sure were at war. The Navy really took a hell of a beating. There's no two ways about it. Oh, they just dive bombed the heck out of the battleships parked around Ford Island inside of Pearl Harbor. I went to the supply to get a rifle, to get a gun, period. Well, first I tried to go across the parade ground to the big barracks for protection, which was a dumb thing on my part to do because they were trying to torpedo the large barracks. The barracks. And that's one time that I was fired on. I ran in front of the 1-0 strapping the barracks also. And so I lucked out. He didn't let me. I turned around and went back to my barracks, to the orderly room where the supply office was, and to get the gun and what have you. And here's a lineup already forming. And that was another time that the Zeros strafed the line. And several were hit, but no fatalities. And the supply sergeant says, "Rank, name, and serial number, sign." But after that strafing, he says, "Come and get them." So I ended up finally with a rifle and 2 belts of .30 caliber over my shoulders. I guess I must have looked like Pancho Villa or something like that. And I got me a .45 pistol and my pocket full of .45 caliber shells and what have you. And I was ready for street to street, corner to corner activity. But here, there was no activity. After the raid, there was much organizing and reorganizing. I ended up in an organization that was now slated to deploy further to Fiji Islands. This is down under. I'm a mechanic on the B-17 and the B-24. And I had good reason to believe that my commander prevented me from, or my application for cadets back in the States, flying cadets. And I ended up in Fiji Islands. I want to tell you, I think, maybe one of the most important stories of my life. After being at Fiji Islands 4 or 5 months roughly, B-24s were coming through, and I worked on those more than I did on my own aircraft. I saw an African American warrant officer, about 4 or 5 days almost in a row, came down to this little dinky hangar near this gravel runway and look and look and look and look at the B-17s. Well, finally I had some free time, so I went over to him to get some information, and then finally I said, "Would you like to see the airplane?" Oh, his enthusiasm was almost, shall we say, explosive. And I thought, well, hell, that warranted royal treatment. So what I did was took him around the B-17 and had him move the controls and explained everything I could. Took him inside from the tail gunner's position, waist gunner's position, through the bomb bay, and explained where the bombs and how and what, and took him into the nose of the aircraft where the bombardier and the navigator sat, and showed him the northern bomb sight and the instruments that the navigator uses. And then I brought him back on the flight deck and put him in the pilot's seat. Then I had him open the window and move the controls and look out and see what he was doing. I had him move the throttles, the prop controls, the mixer controls, and then I even had him turn on the battery switch so that he could lower the flaps and raise it up in the cowl flaps around the engine or what have you. I made a good friend. He finally said to me, trying to make this a little short, he says, "You know so much about this airplane, why don't you fly them?" And I said, well, I said, back in Hawaii, I did have my application in, but I have reason to believe my commander doesn't want to turn me loose. And I says, and also, by the way, just about 2 weeks ago, roughly, I reapplied here, and I was surprised that that we were allowed to do it from here even. And I said, but I haven't heard anything. And that was all there was to that after, and we separated. I would say another 5 or 6 days later, he came down to this one dinky hangar. We were having a meeting, And he came over to me in a half voice, and he said, "Your papers are on top." About another 4 or 5 days later, I was on a little boat to WWII Island nearby. There was parked a Dutch boat by the name of Boschfontein. Apparently, the Coast Artillery, which he belonged to, and I didn't know it at the time, was already established there, and perhaps contracted with the captain of this Dutch boat to haul about 12 of us back to the States. I was on that boat. And I don't mind telling you, several times, it was 20 days from Fiji Island to Los Angeles. But I don't mind telling you, I would get up in the middle of the night and go up to the bow of the boat and scream as loud as I could, "I have a chance. I have a chance. I have a chance." I'm a staff sergeant now at this particular point. 20 days, Los Angeles, Santa Ana. Went through a lot of mental and physical examinations and what have you. Passed them all. I'm on my way to Thunderbird 1, Phoenix, Arizona, Stearman. Finished that. Then went to Marana, Arizona on BT-13. Finished that. Then I went to San Marfa, Texas, a couple hundred miles east of El Paso. And then I hit the jackpot. I got my wings. And the day before, they discharged me as a staff sergeant. And now, today, February the 8th, I think it was, 1944, I was a second lieutenant, commissioned. I got the airplane I wanted. Hear this. Oh, I wanted fighters, but I knew damn well there's a better fighter pilot around, but I better stick with my assets. Since I knew the airplane backward and forward mechanically, all I have to do is learn how to fly it. So what I did on an application showing your preferences and what have you, I put down number 1, B-17. Number 2, B-17. And of course, number 3, as you say. And this captain sent me in to see the major, and he thought I was having, without being a smart ass or something like that, you know. So I went in to see the major, and I said, "Major, let me explain." He said, "What the hell you're here for?" And I says, "Well, look, I know the airplane mechanically, backwards and forwards. All I have to do is learn how to fly. Why shouldn't I be allowed to fly the B-17? Oh, I get you, sure. I'll make damn sure you're on the road to Hobbs, New Mexico, railroad to Hobbs, New Mexico to become first pilot on the B-17. And was given a crew, co-pilot, bombardier, navigator, and 6 gunners. And then, let me tell you about my little bombardier, very interesting. He was a first lieutenant, he outranked me, and I said, "What in the world are they doing to me?" And then I noticed that he had a good gift of gab, and I thought, well, that'll come in handy. He can entertain the crew. Well, I concentrate on 3 things: survival, survival, survival. Then I learned he was an instructor bombardier at Deming, New Mexico, near the border. And I thought, well, how lucky can I get? Because he knew how to manipulate that northern bomb site. And so I was very thankful. Okay, from there we went to Gulfport, Mississippi, combat crew training. I have a few stories there, but after I completed the combat training, I was sent to Hunterfield, Georgia, picked up a new B-17, and now I was on my way to Italy via Grenier, New Hampshire, Gander, Newfoundland, and across the ocean to the Azores, a bunch of islands just west of Lisbon, Portugal. And from the Azores down to Morocco, Northwest Africa, Marrakech. And then from there to Tunis, North Central Africa. And then finally, north, about 10 degrees north, to Fiji, Italy. So I arrived in Fiji, Italy, and after 4 or 5 flights getting checked out, the guy checking me out, I had to check him out. I think that had something to do later on. And I was now with my own crew, and after a couple of missions, I was asked, or I'm not quite sure whether I was asked or told to fly squadron lead. So 2 flights, I was checked out as squadron lead. They said, you're now a squadron lead. And I thought it was rather early in the game, but that was all right with me. And the reason for saying that is I flew a total of 21 squadron leads. In my last one, a group lead, 28 B-17s. However, I got to tell you this. About my second sortie as squadron lead, Charlie Squadron, Abel, Baker, Charlie, Dog Squadron, 4 squadrons. Mostly I flew Charlie Squadron. About my second sortie, I almost got blown out of the sky. I didn't know whether or not I was going to make it home. And this is where being a mechanic on the B-17 helped quite a bit, by the way. But anyhow, I finally got back. Now I thought, I lied awake at night. Something's wrong here. The position of Charlie Squadron lead, that's the 3rd squadron in a row, in line, squadrons in line. To me, it was a pretty dumb maneuver. It was without a doubt in my mind flying Baker, Charlie, Dog lead, kamikaze, suicide. No question about it. Once the Germans were darn good with that 88 millimeter. They knew how to use it. They knew how to calibrate or adjust it or tune it to hit the squadron lead. They did know that the Northern bomb site was in the lead, only in the lead aircraft, lead squadron. And once they picked up the lead Able aircraft track to the target, they now know pretty closely where the Baker lead and the Charlie lead and the Dog lead aircraft would be. It was that simple. There it is. And I was now going to say, here, take this squadron lead, because I wanted to fly loose and jam it. But after, as I said, lying awake at night for 4 or 5 nights, I said to my bombardier at breakfast, Andy, Fred Anderson, let's go for a walk. I got a question. Of course, I already knew the answer to the question. What I wanted to establish what I'm going to do and what I've got to say, keep it confidential, just between the two of us. I emphasized that more than anything else. So I said to Andy, will you have a problem if I extend my base leg before turning on to a track other than the designated? In other words, here would be the designated track, but I would go extend the base leg and come in on my track to the target, you see. He picked it up right away, and he knew why. And he said, I agree, I got you. If it hadn't been for that maneuver on my part, I wouldn't be sitting here today.
What were your most common targets? Was there some place you went
in
over
my
and over?
case,
Yeah.
mostly marshaling yards, railroad yards, and some bridges. Now, I have bombed, oh, well, that was marshaling yard too. I was going to point out that I bombed at night a single aircraft using radar. The lead aircraft had, only the lead aircraft had the Northern bomb sight and radar. I did not have a ball turret gunner. I lost him when I became a squadron lead pilot. And I have to tell you, I prefer that radar for navigation. Matter of fact, I bombed the marshaling yard at Vienna in thunderstorms. And that bugged the hell out of me, carrying bombs in a thunderstorm. Hell, the brackets could break loose, you know, and hang up in the bomb bay, that kind of stuff. But I managed to do it using the radar. It was a three-way conversation. The radar gave me steers to the target, and then he also told the bombardier when I would be over a certain point, physically over a certain point on the ground, then the bombardier, with his judgment, see, would know how much greater distance it would be before the bomb hit the ground, that kind of stuff. It was, so I was a little burned up about that one. I said next morning, I said to my immediate commander, I said, what did I accomplish last night? He didn't answer me. And 10 minutes later, I said, what did I accomplish last night? And he said, the commander and so-and-so wanted them to know we could bomb any damn time we wanted to. My guts, your blood, that kind of stuff. And well, why did they even take 6 gunners? Messerschmitts don't fly at night, and especially in weather conditions. So why did I have 6 men in fear?
How many missions did you fly overall?
30.
Full 30?
30 sorties.
Yes, sir.
Mission in the 8th Air Force, England, you could have 2 missions for 1 sortie, depending upon the severity of the trip. And I enjoyed it, every bit of it. And I'm glad I made the decision to stay in the service. At the end of the war, I had 5 years, and I thought 15 more years I can retire. I retired from the military at the age of 39.